Good afternoon, Guelph. My name is Mark Peralivus. That rhymes with for all of us. And I just finished going through the People's Party environment platform, and I wanted to peel back some other layers. And so part of the platform says abolish subsidies for green technology and let private players develop profitable and efficient alternatives. I want to point out a program that was developed in Kitchener, Ontario, and we're going to go through it on the Walrus here. Everything I talk about link is in the description. That costs us money and ends up sending our garbage to third world countries and probably polluting rivers inadvertently. And everybody joins in on this travesty. It's unbelievable. Here we go. The Walrus is reporting, quote, and this was originally reported in August 2018 and updated in March 2019. So, most Canadians know the ritual. Check the pickup schedule, sort the waste items, clean the jars, make sure the junk mail isn't stained with coffee grounds, then fill up the blue box, or blue bag, or blue cart, depending on the city, and on the appointed day, haul it to the curb. But as much as Canadians love the blue box, its role in our hearts and minds is much larger than its environmental impact, wrote Diane Sachs, Ontario's Environmental Commissioner, in a report last October. In fact, recycling is one of the least environmentally friendly environmental things one can do. After being picked up, enormous volumes of recyclable waste are unloaded at local material recovery facility, MRF, pronounced like Smurf, MRF, dumped onto conveyor belts and passed through a battery of sieves, magnets, optical sorters, and manual workers who separate each item into its own stream: plastic, paper, metal, and so on. The batches from each stream are then sent into gigantic balers, squeezed into cubes, and sold often by middlemen companies to, quote, end marketers. These are the manufacturers in Canada and around the world that profit from turning our waste into something new: toilet paper, perhaps, or plastic lawn furniture, egg cartons, or drywall. More than a public service, recycling is largely a commodity business, as dependent on supply and demand as any other. When municipalities produce more recyclable garbage than end markets can absorb, the value of the product decreases, and in the selling market, Canada faces competition from countries across the world. The limitations of a market-driven system mean that once industrial and commercial waste streams are factored in, about 2/3 of Canadian waste still ends up in landfills. Recycling persists not because it's efficient, it isn't, or effective, it's much less so than we think, but because we feel obliged to do it. It helps us feel better about the waste we produce. According to one estimate, 850 kilograms of garbage per capita every year. When they were first introduced, blue boxes on the Canadian driveways and sidewalks seemed almost revolutionary. People were extremely enthusiastic, says Dan Hornwig, a professor at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology. They, quote, really wanted to recycle, but the box came with conditions, an unfortunate compromise between environmentalists, government, and the soft drink industry that created the perfect conditions for an explosion in litter. In the mid-1980s, Ontario, after years of arguments with the province, the soft drink industry agreed to partially subsidize the blue box, which had been invented a few years earlier by a garbage collector in Kitchener, in exchange for being allowed to switch from refillable glass bottles to cheaper disposable ones. The deal helped create one of the world's most popular residential recycling programs, which soon began spreading nationwide, but it also gave industry a social license to create one-time use packaging. Aluminum cans, yogurt containers, those plastic wrapped cheese and cracker kits parents put in kids' lunchboxes. In a sense, recycling became the preferred method for excusing wastefulness. To make matters worse, almost 2/3 of Canada's waste produced by the industrial, commercial, and institutional and construction and demolition sectors, in everything from factories to office buildings, which are serviced by private waste haulers, unless they can make a profit selling recyclables, which depends on market prices at the time of sale, there's little incentive for these haulers to recycle. All of that means that you can put your takeout containers and shredded paper into the office recycle bin, but the company that takes it away is under no legal obligation to recycle it. In Toronto, for example, 72% of waste material from apartments and condo buildings goes straight to landfill. Ontario is the only province from which detailed financials are available. In 2016, the Blue Box collection cost municipalities a total of $347 million, and only about $95 million was recovered from subsequent sales. The rest of the bill was split between the municipality and industry. The idea early on was that sales of recyclables on the open market would pay in full for recycling programs. That, of course, never happened. Our blue boxes contain a lot of, quote, lightweight, complicated materials that cost a fortune to recycle, Sachs says. Whenever a confused resident places an unrecyclable item, say a plastic-lined takeout coffee cup, into their box, it only aggravates the situation. Quote, you basically end up paying to process the item twice, says Jim McKay, who oversees Toronto's solid waste management services, once as a recycling and at the MRF and once as garbage. In the end, according to Sachs's report, the blue box diverts only 8% of Ontario's material from landfills. Other provinces with fewer homes served by curbside pickup probably recycle even less. Residential recycling itself also comes with significant environmental footprint of its own, especially tied to transportation and carbon emissions. In some circumstances, recycling could actually end up as an environmental liability. In rural areas, you have trucks going half a kilometer between houses picking up recyclables, Hornwig said. It makes no sense. Once you tally up the emissions associated with picking up products, sorting them at a MRF, and sending a batch to far-flung end markets, it's not difficult to imagine that it's sometimes better to send recycling to the dump. This January, China declared war on Aweigh, and I'm sorry I've got that wrong, I've said it incorrectly, but it's foreign garbage. After decades of purchasing recycling that was cluttered with undesirable objects, such as greasy pizza boxes, the country sets strict cleanliness standards for the material it purchases. The announcement sent the global industry into a frenzy. For decades, China had been the end market for more than half of the world's plastic and paper, which are used as raw materials in Chinese building and manufacturing. I scroll down. The effects were immediate. Exports of plastics and scraps to China fell from 6,700 tons in January 2017 to 578 1 year later. 578 tons. Paper scrap exports fell from 53,000 to 15,800 tons. Some of that leftover material is finding its way to other foreign markets, mostly in Southeast Asia and India. Some of it is ending up in landfills. Halifax has resorted to burning its plastics in waste to energy facilities. And as of this May, Calgary was still storing more than 7,500 tons of paper. At that time, the city also hadn't been able to find buyers for 1,000 tons of clamshell plastics, the little containers that berries come in. They're lamenting and covered adhesive labels. They're laminated and covered in adhesive labels, says Sharon Howland, Calgary's leader of the program management for waste and recycling. Nobody wants them. So there's a problem, and the problem is plastics, and part of the problem is the social license given by this recycling program that didn't work. You'd think that in view of the evidence that this plastic stuff didn't work and the single-use container license that was purchased by the soft drink industry for the paltry cost of subsidizing blue boxes should be revoked, should it not? Here's the World Economic Forum. Again, all of my links are in the description. And it says 90% of plastic polluting our oceans comes from just 10 rivers. Here it is. Over the last decade, we've become increasingly alarmed at the amount of plastics in our oceans. More than 8 million tons of it end up in the oceans every year. If we continue to pollute at this rate, there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean by 2050. But where does all this plastic waste come from? By analyzing the waste found in the rivers and surrounding landscape, researchers were able to estimate that just 10 river systems carry 90% of the plastic that ends up in the ocean. 8 of them are in Asia: the Yangtze, Indus, Yellow, Ganges, Pearl, Amur, Mekong, and 2 in Africa, the Nile and the Niger. So it's interesting that that's happening, and yet we're shipping our garbage to China until they said no. Here's New York Times reporting, plastics pile up as China refuses to take the West's recycling. This is important stuff. Why are we screaming about something that's going to happen 10, 20, 100 years out by 2100? And still, this is happening. Plastics is happening right now, and I don't hear anything about it except to ban straws, but we're not solving the problem. We're still producing single-use plastic. We're still producing these things and then shipping our garbage to China or other foreign markets. How environmentally friendly is that? It is insane to tax people for carbon and leave this problem unsolved, leave this problem open and festering. It is a problem. Back to the article. It's January 11th, 2018, this was reported. Ever since China announced last year that it no longer wanted to be the world's garbage dump, recycling about half of the globe's plastics and paper products, Western nations have been puzzling over what to do when the ban went into effect, which it did on January 1st. The answer to date, in Britain at least, is nothing. At least one waste disposal site in London is already seeing a buildup of plastic recyclables and has had to pay to have some of it removed. Similar backups have been reported in Canada, Ireland, Germany, and other European nations, while tons of rubbish is piling up in port cities like Hong Kong. Here's a One other thing about plastic bags. This is a chemistry professor who weighs in on plastic bags, paper or plastic. But first, before we get to that, I wanted to outline this. Here is, have you guys heard of the Philippine garbage situation? Okay, so the Philippines, Global News is reporting, the Philippines is shipping back Canada's heaping garbage. What is Ottawa going to do with the trash? A cargo ship has arrived in a northern port in the Philippines and is ready to return a massive pile of rotting garbage to Canada, 1,500 tons of it to be exact. 69 containers of trash will be loaded onto the MV Bavaria starting Thursday night, and it will head to Vancouver on Friday, according to Administrator Wilma Isima of Subic Bay Freeport. Interesting, right? Here's the February 13th, 2014 article of the trash where it originally came from. Whitby plastic recycler denies shipping trash to the Philippines. A Whitby businessman accused of illegally shipping mounds of trash marked or masked as recyclable plastic to the Philippines is flatly denying the charge. Their story of this garbage thing is just driving me nuts, says Jim Macris, owner of Chronic Incorporated, a business that sends mixed plastics across the Pacific to be sorted in the Philippines and sold for recycling. Anybody using plastic, who knows plastic, will tell you it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. You can read the whole article down here, or you can look at the report I did earlier on it. The link is in the description. Back to the plastic bags and the last story. No, not quite back to the plastic bags. Here's the climate change minister talking about the Philippine garbage. Anchors Aweigh, the containers of garbage have departed the Philippines and will arrive in Canada in 4 weeks, where the waste will be turned into energy that'll power homes in British Columbia. Right. So why didn't you do that in the first place? Oh, right, because it was a plastics guy who was sending plastics to the Philippines and expecting money in return. Really. And no mention of the CO2 on the barge that used there, climate minister. Very interesting. And now the long-teased plastic bag story, just because I find this interesting. Chemistry professor David Tyler Left has taken an interest in the environmentally sensitive decisions that confront consumers every day. Plastic grocery bags or paper. Take the car to work or public transit. Disposable cups or ceramic mug that can be used over and over again. Tyler has surveyed some of the research on these alternatives and has concluded that the environmental impact of some of our, quote, green choices can be surprising when you consider the effects from cradle to grave. That is, the total impact from the point a product is created from raw materials through its manufacturing, distribution, and consumer use, ending with its disposal or recycling. These life cycle assessments broaden the conventional definition of environmental impact by taking into account all energy and material inputs and then the related consequences, which could include downsides such as climate change, smog, water pollution, land use, depletion of fossil fuels, and more. There are life cycle assessments for everything from owning a dog to buying locally grown tomatoes. Tyler's conclusion: consider all the options and make an informed decision. Some of the things thought to be hard on the environment might not be so bad after all, depending on what's most important to you. Interview by Matt Cooper. In looking at the research that's out there, what have you found regarding plastic shopping bags versus paper or cotton bags? There are really good things about plastic bags. They produce less greenhouse gas, they use less water, and they use far fewer chemicals compared to paper or cotton. The carbon footprint, that is the amount of greenhouse gas that is produced during the life cycle of a plastic bag, is less than that of a paper bag or a cotton tote bag. If the most important environmental impact you wanted to alleviate was global warming, then you would go with plastic. Why is the carbon footprint for a plastic bag less than a paper bag or cotton? Cotton is typically grown on a semi-arid land, so it consumes a huge amount of water, and you also need a lot of pesticides. About 25% of the pesticides used in this country are used on cotton. Paper is just typically considered a fairly polluting industry, whereas the petroleum industry, where we get our plastics, doesn't waste anything. Chemicals haven't had 60 to 70 years to make the product of plastics fairly efficient, and so typically there is not a lot of waste in the petroleum industry. When you point this out to the public at your public talks, what kind of reaction do you get? A lot of people say they don't believe it. It just feels good to think that cotton is better for the environment than plastic. Yeah, right. So interesting. We think that what we're doing both, and here's from the University of Oregon, there's Dr. Tyler. But when we think we're doing something good and positive, like recycling, putting our things in the recycling bin and hoping that they get taken to the right spot, sometimes inadvertently it's not. It's not the most efficient thing to do, way to get rid of the carbon, or way to recycle our goods? Wouldn't it make more sense to find a way to deal with our own garbage rather than shipping it to China and then have them with their zero environmental regulations and their zero, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, deal with the garbage that we created? Why are we shipping this overseas? Why are we allowing it to be shipped overseas? Why have we been fooled into believing that that's somehow environmentally responsible? What else have we been told that's true that maybe isn't and can be proven not? Thanks for watching, everybody. I fear this is a long video, so I meant it to be short. I still have like two more videos to do. One's about temperature all around the country. I've measured it, and we're going to look at it. And the other's about sewage and water and why it's being just let to flow into Canadian waterways. Sewage. Ugh. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca. Check out markforallofus.com. Check out ppcguelph.ca. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.